"You're lucky, Kelly, because you're beautiful," admiringly said Zoe. "All the guys look at you only, and Marlon has been in love with you for a long time." Kelly was in complete agreement with her friend. She stood in front of the mirror and admired her beauty. A well-shaped figure, golden curls, and wide-open blue eyes. No one could remain indifferent next to such a beauty. The girl smirked, realizing that the simple-looking Zoe would never be able to compete with her. Kelly turned to her friend, coquettishly twirling a curl around her finger. "Oh, Zoe, don't exaggerate. Marlon is not my type, and he and I are only friends. You can have him for yourself." She snorted and laughed. But Zoe knew that she could not get Marlon so easily, especially since he secretly dreamed of Kelly, even though she did not consider him as her boyfriend and communicated with him only as a friend. All Zoe could do was to keep sighing in silence for him. After school, she went to study in the same city as Marlon, while Kelly went to study in another place, and she saw Marlon only on vacations. At the new city, Kelly got plenty of admirers, but the girl immediately singled out one of them. Benjamin was the son of one of the most influential businessmen in the city. His father fully provided for his son, who spent his father's money on expensive restaurants, gifts for Kelly, and travel. Benjamin rented them an apartment, and Kelly was happy to have such a well-off boyfriend. She was sure that Benjamin was her ticket to a happy and prosperous life, and when the guy finally proposed to her, she immediately said yes. To be sure, at first, Benjamin's parents were not pleased with their future daughter-in-law from the village, but the girl used all her charm and cunning to please them. Kelly agreed with them in all things, made herself love what they loved, and even affectionately called Benjamin as his mother called him. So it wasn't long before Kelly became the most desirable daughter-in-law in the world to Benjamin's parents. So what if she is a country girl? The most important is that she loves our boy, admired the future in-laws. Soon there was a magnificent wedding. Zoe and Marlon were also invited, and the girl could not hide her joy. She understood that Marlon would now forget about Kelly, and she would have a chance to win his heart. When she caught the bride's bouquet, she had full confidence that soon she would have a wedding too. And indeed, after a while, Zoe and Marlon began dating. At the graduation year, Marlon proposed to Zoe. The girl agreed with pleasure, and the young couple began to prepare for their wedding, which they planned to play in their native village immediately after graduation. They invited everyone they knew to the party, and of course, first of all, they invited their favourite friend Kelly. Kelly arrived at the wedding a few days in advance. She was dressed up in expensive brand-name clothes, and her sparkling convertible literally screamed of her wealth. Kelly jumped out of the car and, staggering on high heels, hurried towards her smiling friends. "Marlon, Zoe!" she shouted joyfully, but then suddenly twisted her leg and collapsed right into Marlon's arms. "Oh, it really hurts!" cried Kelly. She tried to stand on her hurt leg, but immediately cried out in pain. "Zoe, I'll take Kelly to her house and then I'll be back," said Marlon to his future wife, easily picking up their friend in his arms. Zoe even felt proud of her fiancé at that moment, watching as a kind and strong Marlon rushed to help the poor girl. She offered to take Kelly to the medical office, but she protested and assured them that she would be much better at home. Zoe didn't argue, especially since she still had a lot of pre-wedding worries to deal with. Marlon was carrying Kelly to her house while she snuggled up to him and dug her nose into his neck, feeling wild joy that her cunning plan had succeeded. Kelly had planned ahead both her fall in high heels and her painful trauma. And all this was because she had learned about Marlon and Zoe's wedding and felt a burning jealousy. She felt so bad that she could hardly eat or drink. In her mind, she could not understand how Marlon, who had been her faithful admirer for many years, could fall in love with such an ordinary girl as Zoe. Kelly decided to win back Marlon by all means, and it did not bother her at all that she was married herself. When Marlon brought Kelly home, he bandaged her leg, and she suddenly offered him a little drink. After a glass of wine, Kelly started to cry. With tears in her eyes, she confessed her love for Marlon and told him that she did not want to lose him. "Kelly, wait, but you had pushed me away when you married your Benjamin." "With Benjamin, I am provided for all my life and I am not going to divorce him, but I've always loved only you, and I won't give you up to anyone else. You love me too, won't you admit it?" "You are right. I love you," confessed Marlon, and it suddenly dawned on him. "So, are you offering to become lovers?" Kelly only laughed in response and, pulling him to her, passionately kissed him. Marlon did not come home until the evening, and to Zoe's surprised questions, he lied that a friend had called him and asked him to help change the oil in the car. Zoe's heart ached, and her imagination immediately drew an ugly picture. But she tried to push away sad thoughts. She knew that Kelly was happily married, and as her best friend, she was incapable of meanness. A couple of days later, Marlon and Zoe's wedding took place. The young people accepted congratulations, smiled, but it seemed to Zoe that her husband was somewhat aloof. While she chatted with the guests, he did not even notice how her young spouse had disappeared somewhere. She went outside and looked around, but Marlon was nowhere to be found. Suddenly, she noticed Kelly's shiny car wobbling strangely, and bitter suspicions arose in her mind. She approached the car, but the two people inside were so engrossed in each other that they didn't notice anything. "Your silly cow didn't even notice you and me leaving," cheered Kelly. "Yes, my dear," laughed Marlon, and there was a sound of passion-filled romp. Zoe's first wish was to take a huge stone and throw it at the window of Kelly's brand-new car, to shower the shameless lovers with 1,000 painful shards. But instead, she covered her face with her hands and ran. After a dozen steps, she stumbled and fell and remained lying in the grass, shuddering with inconsolable sobs. "Zoe, don't cry. He's not worthy of you," came a voice nearby, and someone's hands gently lifted her from the ground. "Hugo?" Zoe recognized a guy from her school. "And how do you know why I'm crying?" What a secret! Kelly was a rat at school and still is. Not for nothing did I always put frogs in her school bag, laughed the man merrily. "So it was you?" smiled Zoe through her tears. Hugo nodded proudly. Hugo was a year younger than Zoe and Kelly and was a known bully at school. "Do you want to make fun of them now?" winked Hugo. "I do," resolutely nodded Zoe, who suddenly felt calm and hopeful beside him, and she completely lost the desire to cry. Hugo immediately jumped on his scooter and, raising a cloud of dust, disappeared into the darkness. Zoe smiled and thought that Hugo was probably still the same prankster he had been in his school days. 10 minutes later the guy returned, sitting behind the wheel of a huge truck filled to the top with fresh manure. The smell was such that Zoe covered her nose with her hands, and Hugo, pulling up beside her for a second, shouted, "Now, get your camera ready. You're going to shoot for history." Hugo slowly drove the truck up to the fancy convertible just as Zoe's unfaithful husband and Kelly, having enjoyed each other, decided to head back to the wedding. They were just getting out of the car when, first class, according to Hugo, cow manure fell on their heads. The unbearable smell spread around, and even the guests came out to see what was going on. Kelly was hysterical, trying to wipe the brown mud from her expensive suit, but it only penetrated deeper into the thin fabric. Marlon looked no better, but stood silent, and only Zoe was bursting out laughing, filming the whole scene on her smartphone. "This is for you, my dear lovers, from the silly cow," laughed Zoe. "Ooh, you wretch! You don't know who you're messing with. I'll sue you," squealed Kelly, wiping the muck from her golden curls. "I know exactly who you are, and I'll send your husband a video. He should know too," said Zoe cheerfully. "Hugo, that was the best revenge ever," she shouted to the guy, sending him an air kiss. Hugo laughed and, promising to help if she still needed it, got into the truck and drove off into the darkness. Zoe, meanwhile, went into the cafe where the celebration was taking place, and tossing her wedding ring on the floor, said loudly, "That's it. The wedding is over, dear guests. Now we celebrate the divorce." Zoe divorced Marlon. Benjamin, upon learning of the cheating, kicked Kelly out of the house. The girl got absolutely nothing during the divorce, as she had violated one of the main points of the marriage contract. And Marlon turned out to be too poor for Kelly. She considered him only as a lover. Zoe began to date Hugo, but so far she only looked closely at this crazy prankster.